Hi, I'm Kuunda. Today, or tonight, is February 18th, 2022, and night has fallen on Ottawa. Hell knows what's going on there right now. I spent most of the day watching live streams and hearing stories about what's going on there. I saw an elderly lady get knocked to the ground and hopefully not trampled by an RCMP horse. I have no idea how she's doing. I hope she's doing okay. Today was really disappointing. It I don't know about anybody else, but in some ways kind of sucks the energy right out of you. And in this video, I want to talk about how world peace can't come about by planetary domination, and how peace in general can't come about by government domination. I think throughout my entire life, I was born 3 years after Tiananmen Square, and throughout my entire life, we've seen governments try and control things to a large degree in the name of preserving peace. We can see mixed results as a result of that. Let me know in the comments how you think that's been going, but I'm not impressed. I I think we've seen how much of a failure that strategy has been, and it's it's sad in a way because if you can't tell, I kind of consider myself a hippie. I've got my Save the World shirt. I've got my peace sign. I'm a bit of a new age hippie. New age is in modern, not new age is in here are my crystals. I should have brought those out for this. But that said, I bring all that up to say back in the 60s, the original hippies were calling for world peace. And it was a very, very reasonable dream back then. And in many ways, it still is. But those hippies have grown old now. And for the people who lived through World War II, who lived through Vietnam War, and even the people at home who were observing both of those from afar, the people who lived through the Cold War, I completely understand wanting an end to war, but have we seen war end, or are we the beneficiaries of national and world governments who have just been able to, while taxing us all to pay for it, have been able to keep war far away from us and out of our sight and out of our mind? It's something a lot of us need to think about a hell of a lot more, and really ought to be wondering about. And the sad part is, I think most of these people have sincere, good intentions. I don't want to speak to or about Trudeau. Don't know what he's thinking these days. I don't know how anybody can excuse the government that he's leading when you listen to how, whenever questioned in the House of Commons, he is just completely deflectionary and will not give a straight answer about anything. But I know lots of other people, ordinary, everyday people, who are older than I am, who think we're more or less on the right track. And it's sad. And our local MP, he's a liberal, a fairly new liberal. I think it's his second term now. He's not very much older than I am. if even any. I think he might only be a couple of years older than I am. And I do think many of these people, again, not speaking to Trudeau or about Trudeau or Freeland or of the high level leaders, but the everyday supporters, the voters, the lower level MPs, I think they have sincere, good intentions, even if they're misguided. But one thing that we need to keep in mind is intention doesn't always and often doesn't translate into impact. You can have good intentions and have a terribly negative impact. And that's what we're seeing probably on the ground in Ottawa right now, certainly throughout the day, to a large degree over these last 2+ years, from the people who prop up the Trudeau Liberal government and globalized governments around the world. And I think we've really got to rethink a whole lot of that. A lot of people put a lot of faith in globalized organizations. The UN, the UN is probably the big one, but the other smaller ones to kind of manage things like global climate change, important issue. Not sure we're going about it the right way. The Indigenous injustices in Canada through the UN's UNDRIP. Again, important issue. Probably not going at it the right way by expecting the UN and UNDRIP to be the salvation through that. We need to be communicating amongst each other and working together. And it's really sad to see people and organizations like Idle No More actively abstaining from getting involved with the freedom movement when we really ought to be working together for a better Canada, and hopefully through doing that, a better world overall. But we need to focus on our own backyard before we expect Canadian politicians. We shouldn't expect Canadian politicians to fix the world. They take that on themselves, and that is something that we should be condemning to a large degree. But it is what it is, and we're seeing today, again, February 18th, 2022, where that has got us. And just to finish up on these global organizations or globalized organizations, things like Open Society, the UN, the WEF, that wants us to own nothing and be happy about it. A lot of people condemn people involved in the national federal government for being involved in these organizations. And I think that is a personal or a perfectly reasonable personal prerogative for attentive Canadian voters. But we need to be honest in investigating these things. We can't just look at every Liberal MP that we see and be like, oh, that was a person involved in the youth group of the WEF. Now, I'm not saying nobody was. I'm just saying that we need to have honest, independent investigations into those things. We can't just try and slander people with allegations of that. And I don't think people are actively trying to slander people, but you need to be open to being wrong if you think that's what's going on. Celebrate being right when you are, but you need to be open to not being right about things. I think we need to have respect for regional diversity, both within Canada and outside of Canada. I've had discussions with a friend of mine who is a big Green Party supporter, and he thinks our province should be looking at implementing official bilingualism. And if that's what the people want, that's what the people want. Democracy is one of the 6 fundamental Green Party values. It goes back to those globalized organizations again. The Global Greens are one of those, and they're kind of the umbrella for the Green Party of Canada and the provincial Green parties. But because democracy is a fundamental pillar of Green parties, I think data should at least be collected. If official bilingualism policy is to be pursued, especially by a Green Party, maybe it should be by referendum. At the very least, there should be a referendum poll to gather that data to see where our province stands on that. And as far as our province goes, we have an officially bilingual province right next door. And right next door to that province, we have another that has French as the first language. Do we really think it's the best idea to be spending money right now when there are so many other issues that need money in our province, when we are so heavily reliant on equalization payments, but also needing to increase our healthcare capacity? As the past 2+ years, if there is anything to be learned from it, is that healthcare capacity and healthcare quality in general really ought to be improved. It's a valid question, and to say that status quo should just be, it should just go through the status quo channels, and if we end up with bilingualism, whatever, I don't think that's the take. I do not think that is the take. And on not only interprovincially, we should have diversity interprovincially. People should be able to live in a province they like, and provinces should be allowed to be different. And if people prefer a different province to the one they're in, they should be free to rally to have their province changed, sure, but they should also be free to relocate to the province that they would prefer to be in. I've made some friends recently. They come from Quebec. They like it here. I'm happy that they like it here. But the flip side of that is, if people from here would be happier living in a more French dominated place, or even a place that's officially bilingual, we already have those kind of provinces in Canada. It's not terribly unreasonable to say to go there. And on a global scale, that applies too. I was always raised to think that Canada has respect for diversity. I do not think that Canada is or should be a Christianity dominated place. We have seen the harms that come from that from its first 150 or so years. I was always raised to think that Canada was more of a mosaic than a melting pot, and I think that's really what we should be. But that said, there are other places around the world that are more Christianity dominated. Perhaps our southern neighbors are like that. There are plenty of other countries like that. There are places that are still dominated by Islam, for better or worse. But people who prefer to live in an Islamic society ought to be free to go there. And people who would rather relocate out of such a society should be free to come to a place that is more equal. And I don't think that is unreasonable of a view to have. World peace is not going to come from turning the entire world into a melting pot under a single government or organizations that act as if they were a single government. And Canada has a lot of making up and a lot of catching up to do. Like I said, for a long time, it was a Christianity-dominated society. We're seeing many of the people who are protesting for freedom taking issue with it moving away from that. And balance needs to be had. Like, part of why these protest movements, this freedom protest, is so large and dominated by Christianity to the degree it is because the liberal government has gone too far in the opposite direction. Christians are feeling as if they are oppressed now under the Canadian government. And there is a debate to be had over whether or not that really is the case or whether it's not. I would argue that in at least some small ways it is the case, but Canada has made people within its borders suffer and lied to them for a long time. And I have two symbols of that right here with me. The lesser of them, I'll show you right here. It is a t-shirt I have. I wish it wasn't reversed right now. I'll check out the video and see if it still is and mirror the video if it is. But this shirt talks about the Senate Special Committee on Illegal Drugs from 2002 and talking about the continued prohibition of cannabis jeopardizes the health and well-being of Canadians much more than does the substance itself. And that's true. And they had known that for a long time, at least 2002, I would argue before that. But Canada, being a slow-moving bureaucratic behemoth, didn't start to change that until one of the more recent Trudeau administrations in the mid-2010s. And we should have changed that a whole lot earlier. And speaking of things that should have been changed a whole lot earlier, I have here a book by Daniel Paul, We Were Not the Savages. And in this book, it goes into a lot of just the deceptive and really unfair, to put it mildly, things that the indigenous people of this continent were put through by early colonial governments, to a degree the French, then to a very large degree the British and the provincial governments, and then also the Canadian government. Before Confederation, the Mi'kmaq in our province were so destitute, their numbers, they came down to only a few thousand, if that. There were families where they lived through the winter totally naked, according to politicians who were responsible for them. And they had one blanket for 5 people. It was a terribly sorry state for things to be in. And while the indigenous populations are rebounding, indigenous people within Canada are one of the few populations whose demographics are actually naturally growing, there is still a lot of work to be done. And it is terribly, terribly unfortunate and shameful that it has taken this long for any progress to be made, let alone how slow and little progress it has been. That's not to discount that there has been progress. There certainly has been, but we need to come together and make more. And this freedom movement, it was and still is, I believe, an opportunity for us all to come together and push for better circumstances in our land, in the land that we share, and hopefully for a better Canada. And I don't think many people are happy about the events that are unfolding and have unfolded already today. I think probably the only people who are happy about it are the mandate supporters and the people within Ottawa who want the mandate supporters out of their city. Other than that, I think people are largely disappointed, if not apathetic, to what's going on. And that really ought to change. We need to come together. We need to be more attentive. And we need to just do and be better. I hope that resonates with some of you. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you have to say. I highly suggest reading this book. It's a good book. You can find it if you look it up online. We need to be building relations with one another. We need to be having more conversations and discussions. And I hope some of that can be facilitated in the comments. So feel free to go nuts down there. Be nice. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Also, I'll probably mention this again in my next video because while I wanted to at the start of this video, it turned into a little bit of a solemn one. But we have passed 100 subscribers on this YouTube channel. I want to thank each and every one of you, even those of you who just stick around to troll me. I appreciate you all. We're at 101 as of recording this, and I hope you stick around. I hope you enjoy your time here, and I hope we can grow together. Have a good rest of your night, weekend, if possible, and let's all just hope and have faith that things will get better.